with our program in English. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Comodini Cachia, for coming here today.
It's a pleasure to be here on your program, Leah, and I look forward to our discussion.
I'd like to start with what we've seen a lot in the press this week, the Speaker abstaining from the vote. We kind of have an explanation about it because it's quite a complex story, really. And when you see it in the press, you sort of understand what he's doing, but not why, perhaps.
Yes, so what happened is that in this country, we established an office of the Commissioner for Public Standards. Now, the role of that office, of that commissioner, is really and truly to keep us MPs in check. So this is a system whereby we make sure that all members of Parliament adhere to the Code of Ethics, which is part of our legislation. There are two different types of Code of Ethics. There's the Code of Ethics, which is applicable to all members of Parliament, and then there is a Code of Ethics, which is applicable to members of Cabinet, that is, ministers and parliamentary secretaries. Of course, the different type of code applies to the responsibility that you shoulder. Members of Cabinet have access to public funding. And one of the rules in the Code of Ethics is, of course, to make sure that you behave and you act ethically and professionally. Of course, that gives rise to an obligation of ours to make sure that all public funds to which we have access are made use in the public interest. That is, we make use of those funds, which are really and truly people's taxes, for the interest and for the service of the members of the public. In this particular case, Dr. Hisle, who is the Commissioner for Public Standards in Public Life, received a complaint about an advert that Minister Abela published on almost all the Sunday newspapers last October. And Dr. Hisle was asked by the complainant to actually give a judgment and to decide whether Minister Abela was correct in paying for that advert, in allocating public funds to pay for that advert.
May I ask what the advert was?
Yes, the advert was a whole back page, a whole full page on the Sunday newspapers, where half of the advert was the photo of Minister Abela, and the remaining half contained not much more than 6 very short sentences. So the main part of that advert, the main attention and focus of that advert was on the minister's photo. The Commissioner found this to be true also because one Sunday newspaper was asked to rerun, to republish that same advert, and the only difference that the Commissioner could find when he compared the advert published on the Sunday paper and the advert published on the Monday paper was simply a touch-up of the photo. So clearly the Commissioner concluded that public funds were being used to promote oneself rather than to give that information which the public would like to receive and which is good for the public to have. And because of this, the Commissioner concluded in his report that therefore there is a breach of ethics, a breach of the Code of Ethics with which we all must abide. The procedure at law is one whereby upon such a conclusion where a breach of ethics is found, the Commissioner is legally obliged to forward his report to the Committee for Public Standards in Parliament. There is a standing committee whereby this committee is the one who must decide whether to adopt that report, whether to make that report our own, and if we make that report our own, what punishment or what remedy, because this is not really a punishment, but how should we remedy the situation? In this case, the remedy would have been one of common sense. If a member of Cabinet is found to have allocated public funds to promote oneself, then common sense will tell you if you've been found out, there's something very simple you should do. You should refund that money.
What sum are we speaking about?
We're speaking of a few hundreds above 7,000. So it's like 7,000 euros and a bit. So we're speaking of an amount which exceeds 7,000 euros, slightly exceeds that amount. And this remedy has not been forthcoming. Minister Abela did not feel it in his own conscience, in his own common sense to say, look out, I've been caught. So let me refund the money. Let me safeguard my own reputation and continue my life in politics, having remedied what the commissioner has found to be incorrect. The minister didn't do that. So the committee was asked whether to adopt that report as its own, whether to make it its own report, and to establish a remedy. So we came to a vote. Now this committee is made up of 4 members of parliament, 2 nominated by the opposition, 2 nominated by the government, and because there is a tie, there is an equal number of members from the opposition and from the government, then the chairperson of the committee is the Speaker of the House. And because it was obviously foreseen that having 2 members from each side of the House could actually lead to a tie when we come to a vote, then the law gives the Speaker a casting vote, which is a determining vote. So basically, the law tells the Speaker, when this group and this group decide to disagree to the extent that they vote in opposite directions, and therefore the vote is a tie, 2 against 2, then you, as the chairperson, must make the decision. You have the casting vote, the vote that will make a difference. Now, there are parliamentary conventions against which that casting vote is to be thrown, is to be cast. Amongst those conventions, there's the rule whereby a casting vote is cast in a manner that allows further discussion. You have a tie, then logic tells you you need to discuss this issue further. And so the casting vote should have been one whereby you allow further discussion. The second rule is that if no further discussion can be foreseen, then the decision is to be taken by a majority. The Speaker in this case decided not to vote. He decided to abstain.
Is that a precedent?
It is. It is considered to be a precedent, one, because everyone thought that a casting vote really meant you say in favor or against. In this case, we have a situation where an abstention leaves us in a tie. And a tie simply means that this committee, the work of this committee, is now stagnated. It is now a stagnant committee, simply because we know that the Speaker has neither allowed discussion on this report to continue, nor allowed the committee to do its work and give a decision on this report. So we are now in a situation whereby we cannot call the report back for discussion, because the Speaker has clearly indicated that the matter is closed. And this is why, together with my colleague in that committee, I declared that for us, a tie means the discussion is still possible. A tie can't mean the discussion is closed, because that has to be determined by a vote of majority. But what is very worrying about this vote of abstention is really and truly that this committee is there to keep a check on all members of parliament. This is the only system which our country has to ensure that our members of parliament do the right thing. They behave ethically, they behave professionally. It is the only manner in which we can ensure that public funds are used by us MPs for the public interest. that we behave ethically, that we abide with the code of ethics with which we are bound by law.
Did the speaker give a reason for doing this?
There was a very long explanation of vote that the speaker gave and read out to be able to explain why he is abstaining. But in doing so, the speaker declared that he was partly in favor of the report. He declared that he was partly against the report, and he also declared how he thinks the way forward should be. But can you imagine being in front of a judge in court, for example, and that judge would say, look here, I am partly in favor of this and partly against the other party, so I decide not to judge. That can't happen.
He doesn't wish to commit, basically.
In reality, that was the message of the explanation of vote. I am partly in favor, partly against. Let's just move forward by saying this is the way forward. But unfortunately, parliamentary procedure doesn't work that way. The only thing that brings about is a situation whereby any one of us, be it the opposition or the members of government, we can simply protect one of our own. So every time that the Commissioner for Standards in Public Life finds any one of us in breach of our code of ethics, we can now claim that the Speaker's right of a casting vote is simply one of abstention. And consequently, we can block all those reports. But blocking all those reports means we are divesting ourselves and we are shedding our responsibility. And our responsibility, as unfortunate as it is to have to shoulder it, our responsibility is one, and that is not to look at our colleagues' interests, but to look at the people's interests. We sit in that committee with the purpose of ensuring that we behave in line with our code of ethics, that we behave respectfully towards the people who have elected us in that seat.
What happens going forward in this particular case?
In this situation, we as members of the opposition have clearly declared that we are reconsidering our position, our agreement on the procedure of the committee. We cannot live in a situation whereby either one of us can block a report. What has been done is really and truly with this vote, we have removed every ounce of responsibility for checking and holding to account members of parliament. We have completely pulled the rug from under the feet of the office of the Commissioner for Standards in Public Life. And this is really ironic, really and truly, because this is the government who established that office. This is the government who repeatedly, when it speaks of how much it favors and how much it is the savior of the rule of law in this country, mentions exactly the establishment of this office as one of the mechanisms that it has used to ensure and safeguard the rule of law in our country. Yet, in the same sentence, it is this same government who has come to a position to tell you, I'm so proud of this office, but I'm proud of it only when it does not find that one of my own has breached the code of ethics. If this office finds that one of my own has breached the code of ethics, then what happens? We stagnate the situation at the committee, but there's also something else which is even more worrying than that. You will have the two members of that committee appointed by the government attacking the office of the Commissioner and the Commissioner himself. So here we see a momentum being built, a momentum which was built in parallel. The behavior of the government at the committee and the behavior of the government politically. So you get one thing being said at the committee which leads to a tie and therefore the report not being adopted, and consequently Minister Abela can continue to do as he pleases. And on the other hand, you had the same two members, particularly one of them, who attacked the commissioner not in one parliamentary speech, but in two parliamentary speeches, who attacked the commissioner on social media and also on the party's television, on the party's own media. And this is worrying, Leah, because we can't afford to attack the very same entities who are there to hold us to account.
How often do you have such cases?
There have been a number of reports that have been concluded by the Commissioner. In some of those reports, the Commissioner has found that the MP has breached ethics. In other reports, the Commissioner has found that the Member of Parliament, that the Member of Cabinet did not breach ethics. So it is not like the Commissioner always finds a breach. On the contrary, this same week, yesterday, the day before, we had another report issued by the Commissioner in which the Commissioner concluded that there was no wrongdoing in the behavior of the minister. Funnily enough, it was the same minister who was also concerned with this. But this is where the scope, the purpose of the government's attack on the office of the Commissioner becomes very obvious, becomes very clear, because the attack started in relation to this particular report. And one questions whether this attack is simply based on the basis of this report, or whether it is also in preparation for other reports which the Commissioner is investigating and which he has not as yet concluded. For example, the complaint about the Honourable Member Rosiane Kutayar. There is a complaint about monies that she may have received from the sale or the promise of sale of a property, and which she may not have declared in her declaration of assets to Parliament. There are other complaints that the Commissioner is investigating. And this is why all this concern was raised. And this is not a concern that was raised purely and solely by us as members of the opposition, but we even had academics, members of the academia.
What solution do you propose, Therese?
I think the solution, the logical solution, would have been that the Speaker realizes that this casting vote is either in favour or against. If once that did not happen, I think the other logical solution is for the Speaker to bring that report again for discussion, and if we come to a tie again, then the Speaker must cast that vote in favour or against. But if that solution is not taken, then the only solution that I see as a member of the opposition to make this committee function is purely, one, to change the internal agreed procedure. Only like that can we really remove the stagnation in which this committee has been now placed.
Thank you. Thank you. Should you have any comments about what Dr. Therese Comodini Cachia has been speaking about, please send a comment to our WhatsApp number that you see on the screen, and she'll be able to address it either personally or during another program on Net TV. I'd like to take a few minutes to have an update from you about the ANEO report on St. Vincent de Paul.
Yes, this is a report published by the National Audit Office, and it is a report that deals with a call for works that had been issued by St. Vincent de Paul, that is by the government, for works to be undertaken at this residence. St. Vincent de Paul is an old people's residence. It is a residence where old persons who require certain medical attention, certain health issues that need to be addressed, are usually residing in this home. What the original way in which all this started was that the government had decided, correctly so, that the kitchen at this residence needed to be refurbished. And so a contract was given incorrectly, I would say, by direct order. This contract was originally meant to cost not more than 3 million euros.
Would you say that the contract is illegal?
Well, the National Audit Office has proposed that the basis of the contract is illegal, but there are a number of contracts that were given on the basis of this initial one. So the initial contract was valued to be at 3 million. At the end of all the extensions to that contract, the value was 13 million. So a difference of 10 million. But all along the way, the government also decided to issue another call, and in that call, put in what the National Audit Office, what the Auditor General described as the Trojan horse. That is, the government said, I want you to tell me the price for building a new kitchen, and I want you also to give me another additional investment that will cost the government absolutely nothing. Well, what should have costed the government absolutely nothing ended up costing the people over 274,000 million.
Yes.
So this is what the National Audit Office is saying. This was a Trojan horse that was likely to have been agreed before the award, and that has a legal basis which is missing.
And there are comparisons between these figures and what it costs in the private sector.
There's definitely those comparisons as well that need to be taken into consideration. But a contract of this value, of a significant value, was not even approved by Cabinet.
So thank you very much for pointing that out and explaining. Just to close, as we're easing out of the restrictions of COVID-19, would you share a message with our viewers tonight, Therese?
Yes, I mean, this is a positive development that we are easing out of COVID restrictions. But although it is a positive development, no one should really take it that we can remove our masks. Leah and I here have removed our masks because we're socially distant and we're two in a space. But nowhere should you really remove your mask. And it is good to see that finally businesses can once again start afresh, and that we as families can also once again continue with our life.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight, my guest is Dr. Therese Comodini, Cachia. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week at the same time. Do send in your comments, queries, questions. Good night.